Hello. We are talking about for week 5, chapter 16, voice. And I really enjoy this chapter because it gives you that nice triangle where you're talking about purpose, audience, and voice, and how it all affects your content and the context that you are writing in. So it's really important to keep thinking about that. Because it's constantly moving as you are thinking about your purpose, right? If you're thinking about your purpose, who's going to care about it, right? That's going to shift your audience, right? And then thinking about, well, what kind of voice do I need to have to really speak to them? Is it formal? Is it informal? So every time you alter one of those pieces, the other two are going to alter also. So it's really important to keep that in mind. That nice little triangle, that visual is really helpful. A couple points that really stuck out to me in chapter 16 is in your voice is to be honest, right? You don't want to deliver something that you can't back up. You don't want to say something that you can't really deliver. So it's important just to be honest. Speaking to rather than at, right? It avoids that superiority complex. And it's really important because I have had students, especially with the writing assignment too, that change that you seek to find, especially in like manager roles. I've had students where, I had a student that worked at a tanning salon, and she stumbled into the management position because her manager left. And now the people that she was working with, she was now managing. And some of the employees were, showing up late, were pretending to be sick. There was all these pieces going on that she felt was like a direct correlation because she was the manager. And so when she wrote her paper and she wanted to, talk to the employees about how to, respect her just like they respected the previous manager, her tone was like harsh, like really harsh, kind of like the you have to do what I say because I am now the manager. And it's really like speaking at rather than speaking to, right? Thinking about who is my audience and maybe how are they feeling during this transition, and how can I kind of help them see that I'm not here to be superior. I'm here to be the manager, and we have, a business to run, and I know you guys and I know what kind of team we can be. And so, changing your voice and approach to being more empathetic based on what you know about your audience, right? Because she had a leg up. She knew her audience because she once worked with them like side by side and is now managing them. So you would think like, hey, what bothers them, what drives them, use that information in your writing to address this current situation that is clearly happening and it's bothering you. But take out the anger, the superiority complex, and speak to rather than at. It's really important. Use your strength in writing to connect to your audience, right? So I've had students that are really good at storytelling, right? And they are driven by a narrative, which I actually, in Foxtail under week 5, I have a really good science-based, fact-based, research-based essay written with a narrative style to it. It's the Why God Created Flies. It's really good. And so if you kind of want to see how that plays out, where the research is integrated into his style of writing, it's fantastic. So check that out so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But know what your writing style is. Like, think about it. How do I typically write easily? Is it more narrative? Is it am I funny? Do I like to add humor? Am I really big on like inspirational quotes? Like, what are my tendencies? What are the things that I typically, gravitate towards in my writing? And use it because that's your strength. and find out how to weave that into your claims and your purpose and your evidence. But I like to do that. I personally like to do it after I've already clearly written out my claim and my evidence, and I've gotten my clarity in place. Then I like to go in and weave in my voice and like figure out what, use my strengths. So I just wrote a piece about using the five senses to kind of calm the storm for children, and something that I use with my kids. And so I went and just kind of wrote down like the five senses and kind of gave examples of evidence on how you can use that for each sense. And so once I had that piece all written out, then I went back and kind of used my humor and used, the phrases that I like to use, and know that like the target audience that I have in mind, what, they would get it, right? They would get me saying this. And so going back in, you can play with that after you've got your clarity in place. It's clear, your message is clear, and it's clearly backed up. So yeah, use your voice. You can inspire people, you can encourage people, or you can completely shut down the conversation, right? So going back to my student who wrote about her, managing this tanning salon, she shut the conversation down, right? And so in her rough draft, and she went back and revised it, and it was a lot more cushiony, kind of using that sandwich method, the criticism with compliments. And so it was more inspirational than kind of ending the conversation. So thinking about that. So also it's, something that I don't usually think about is like, what's my profile? What do I bring to the table? What's my background? How do I identify as a person based on, my religion, my upbringing? What are things that I bring into my writing that maybe may or may not connect with my audience, right? So if it doesn't, think about like, okay, that's me, so that's not who I'm talking to. I need to adjust. Or, hey, this is me and it connects to my audience. Let's go. Let's move with that. Let's connect. So keep that in mind. Yeah, because our upbringings are all different. Like our childhood's all different. Our family dynamics are different. How we vacationed as a kid, what that word even means. Some people only stayed in the States. Some people always went abroad. Some people only went in, road tripped. Others, went and saw family across the country. So keep those things in mind. Okay, so context, chapter 17. Yeah, think about like, where will your writing be displayed? Is this, they talked about, on the computer? Is it a smartphone? Is it a mobile device? Would it be in a magazine? Like a Reader's Digest, newspaper, Southwest Connect, like a local paper? Keeping that in mind, how would your writing best be displayed? And which doesn't really adapt to this class because we're kind of having the same style, right? It's online, it's on a Word document, it's emailed to me, through Foxtail. But like, so, the recent article that I wrote about the five senses, it was very much like a blog post style. I had, the subheadings, my main title, lots of subheadings. It was made to read like on a mobile device. It's short, simple paragraphs with quick tips, not trying to lose people in like the psychological brain development. Like was a target reaching parents that are frustrated and they don't know why their kids are having these outbursts, and what are some new strategies, some new tools that they can quickly utilize in their house. And they were looking, heavy driven, like solution driven. So that's the kind of context that I had for my most recent writing piece. And yeah, like, what's the best way to present your information? I knew they were not going to want this long, drawn out essay about my background and like what I struggled with when I had younger kids or when they were really little and having these outbursts. It was like kind of like a short little snippet, and then boom, right into like, what can you do? What are things that you have around the house to put in your calm down box that can really connect and resonate with your kids, with the parents, that they, things that they could use. That's what they're looking for. Yeah, do you need to break it up, offer visuals, bullet points? So, for this writing, in this course, it's definitely more of like, using the appendices, where I've had students, like if they're, asking their spouse or their children to create, this budget, right? That's a hot topic also for the Seek to Change assignment, is offer a visual, like, showing of what like the budget or spreadsheet looks like, or if you're at work and you're asking your manager for a shift change, or implement a new strategy that'll drive sales, like that's great to add graphics to it and say, like, see appendix B, right? Use visuals, please. It's great. It's a great way to connect with the audience. I have like different links, like for that blog post I recently did, like links to different Pinterest boards to like give other good ideas on how to use the five senses to calm, overstimulated children, things like that. You can, post links to videos of other people speaking, or like me doing a video of like, hey, here's my box that I have in my daughter's room, and these are the different things, so just finding other ways to connect so that the information approaches all different types of learners, right? Some people are audio learners, some people are visual, some people are, they need to have their hands like on it, tactile stuff. So keeping that in mind, like what's the best way to break it up, your information. And then remain flexible, because, your audience is going to change, depending on your message or your purpose. And so knowing what audience and the context it needs is going to shift with every piece that you write. So being willing to adapt to that, because every piece that you write will have a different audience in mind. And so knowing like what kind of context do I need to create my nice little triangle, right, is going to shift each and every time you sit down to write. And then even when you do write, you might realize like, this is not my audience. And so what did my writing reveal to me? What kind of person, group of people am I reaching with this message? And that's going to shift your audience, which is then going to, your purpose is shifted, so your audience will shift, which means your voice and the context that you use will shift. So each time you make revisions, check out your triangle to see where you need to adapt and shift. Be flexible in that. It's really important. And just reading through your writing, thinking about like, we're focusing on higher order thinking skills, right? So thesis statements, people have got this idea of a statement down, but the thesis is like, that's the higher order thinking. That's explaining the so what, the why factor to your statement that you're creating. That's what creates a thesis. So if you're talking, about, let's just say this, stick with the tanning salon situation. If you're focusing on wanting your staff, to respect you and to follow the rules the same as, your previous manager, well, why should they do that? Like, why? It's not just because they're getting paid and they should. Like, that's not going to do anything. I tell my kids, like, oh, go pick up your toys or clean up your room. And they'll be like, why? Because I said so. Like, how well does that ever go? Nope. Right? They need a buy-in, right? And so knowing your audience and what's going to buy them in is that thesis, right? That's that why, that's so what. Because it's not about you. I mean, it is like, it's kind of like that mind game. Like, yes, you're getting what you want, but they think they're doing it because they want to, that you're giving them something, or that you're including them in this, new path that you're seeking out, right? So again, it's not just like because I said so. It's why. Like, what's the buy-in for your audience? What's going to pull them in? What reasoning? And then that's your thesis. And then you can kind of build examples, topic sentences that can kind of relate back to the why factor, right? That's what we're looking for. So keep pushing the boundary, keep pushing that, you have your statement, but why? What's the buy-in for my audience? Because again, you're not talking to me, you're talking to your audience. So what's the buy-in to pull them in? What's that why? That so what piece? That's what we're looking for. So just to kind of give you an example on thesis building, like dogs make great domestic pets. Lots of people think that. Not everyone, lots of people think that. But why? Why everyone, anyone who believes that dogs make great domestic pets have different reasons. So if you're talking to someone who's never owned a dog, or you're talking to someone who's only owned cats and they're thinking about owning a dog, why, right? Why should they? Based on your audience, why? What's the buy-in for them? Why should they consider having a dog, or why should they even consider thinking that dogs make great pets? Based on the audience, right? So it's going to shift. The why will shift based on your audience. So a couple examples are like, dogs make great domestic pets for children because they are reliable, offer unconditional love, and teach empathy. So I've had a student, write about why dogs make great pets, and it was because her son has ADHD, and she decided to get a dog because it really helps like soothe and calm him. So like that thesis statement is really meant for a parent that has, a family that has children, right? Because you're saying like, these are the things they offer to children. And so that thesis statement wouldn't apply to a newly married couple, right? That wouldn't apply to grandparents. That wouldn't apply to just, if you just said, oh, this is good for anyone who's thinking about having a dog, like that wouldn't apply to them. That's why I'm saying you can't have a general broad audience for like anyone who's thinking about getting a dog. You need to narrow your focus of like who I really want to speak to. I want to speak to parents, right? And here's an excellent, maybe parents who have kids with disabilities or learning disabilities or struggle with anxiety, right? All three of those have different narrowed focuses, and I could alter my thesis to target each individual audience that I just said right there. So that's kind of what we're looking for as you're moving on to your next writing assignment. Dogs make wonderful pets for children, right? Dogs teach children life skills that will help them build their self-esteem. So that one's a little bit more general because it doesn't apply to maybe kids that have anxiety issues or kids with learning disabilities. It's parents with children, right? And what can a dog bring to a child's life? So that's a little bit more broad, but still more focused than just anyone who wants a dog, right? And also, like, if you wanted to target, say, newly married couples, you could shift that. The dogs make great domestic pets for newlyweds or new couples, because you learn about responsibility and maybe some of the tasks that would be required to start a family, or just to have, be responsible for another person that can't take care of themselves, right? Again, all those thesis statements have a why piece and a targeted audience. So that is the goal in this class, is to have a target audience, to have a thesis statement that you can really build off of, and then work towards your, body paragraphs that, hold back to the thesis statement, explain your why, give examples, connect to your audience, all of that. But if you don't have those two pieces in place, then you can't really go back and revise your body paragraphs. Like when you go and you just write, if you don't have a message and an audience, you can't really judge after you've generated all of your content. You can't really judge what works and what doesn't, or what research you need to continue on, or maybe you have to change your thesis statement because you realize your thesis statement and your body's paragraphs aren't lining up, right? So keeping that in mind. And then I just posted a couple thesis statements that could be practice. Like you could look through them and work on them on your own on how to develop by creating a more narrow thesis statement based on a more narrow, like by creating a narrow audience. So try them out, see what you think. A couple things I wanted to talk about. APA format, just a couple things. Okay, so numbering 1 through 10, you write it out. So you would actually write out the word 9. 11, or like 10, TEN, right? You write it out. 11